Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Cole Porter, a Biography, by William Mcbrien, narrated by Joel Froomkin. Chapter 1. We open in Peru. In 1905, when Cole Porter, a boy of 14, boarded the train for Worcester Academy in Massachusetts, he must have felt both triumphant and troubled. His struggle to free himself from his wealthy grandfather's demands that he remain at home in Peru, Indiana, and attend local schools had succeeded. In this, he was abetted by his redoubtable mother, Katie Cole Porter, who in her youth had herself acquired an Eastern education at Colby Academy in New London, Connecticut, and then at Brooks Seminary in New York. There is no evidence that J.O. Cole opposed this move by the daughter, upon whom he doted. In fact, in August of 1882, J.O. and his wife gave a reception and dance honoring their daughter, Miss Kate Cole, just returned from college in the East. But when it came to his grandson, J.O.'s attitude was entirely otherwise. Interestingly, Cole's father took no part in this quarrel. By now, J.O. presided over a financial empire of vast proportions, all of it self-earned, and he had promised his grandson a large share of his fortune. So Cole was jeopardizing an enormous inheritance in countering J.O.'s will. Cole knew his grandfather's promise of a fortune was not ironclad, or at least that is the conclusion he must have drawn from the experience he once related to a biographer. When he was only 8 years old, Cole recalled, J.O. used to drive him a couple of miles out into the rolling Indiana countryside and rein in his horse at the top of a rise. He would point with the end of his buggy whip at a large, rather bleak gray building. "That, Cole," he would say with satisfaction, "is the place where you will end up." It was the county poorhouse. When J.O. threatened to terminate Cole's allowance, Katie did not waver. She responded to her father's refusal to finance Cole's education by using her own money, and by opposing her father's tyranny, she taught her son courage and perseverance. Tyrant, by the way, is a word Cole himself used to describe his grandfather. Annually, on J.O.'s birthday, his wife gave what Cole called 2 long dinners, which all were obliged to attend. Everyone hated it, because his grandfather was so dictatorial, the strong man. J.O. seemed not to realize, when his daughter announced to him her plan for Cole to be educated at East Coast schools, that Katie was exercising the very determination she had inherited from J.O. himself. Cole left for Worcester amid this tempestuous family quarrel, which resulted in his mother and grandfather refusing to speak to each other for 2 years. Perhaps to finesse this standoff, Cole, very much his mother's boy, visited Peru only rarely in his adolescence, nor did any family members go east to visit him. Why was J.O. determined that his grandson attend school locally? Why was Katie determined that her son go to Worcester Academy? And why was her husband silent on the matter of his son's education? To better understand the drama, one must know more about the cast. Certainly they and their forebears played a part in teaching Cole the strength of character that helped him in later life to cope with pain and to combat censorship and all restriction of freedom. The name Cole first surfaces in local history in the person of A. Cole, great-grandfather of Cole Porter, who came with his family from Connecticut to Peru, Indiana in 1834. His son, J.O. Cole, was 6 at the time. Albert Cole was a soldier under Andrew Jackson and an engineer on the Wabash-Erie Canal before he became a distinguished lawyer and judge, and the co-owner of a dry goods store, Cole and Bars. Ironically, In light of J.O.'s insistence that Cole attend school locally, A.A. wanted his son to return east for his education. A.A. had been born in Connecticut, and many of his ancestors had lived and died there. J.O. resisted his father's wishes that he study in the East, and enrolled instead in the Peru Collegiate Institute, which was founded by leading citizens to furnish a thorough academic course, and was said never to have been excelled by any school in the country. For a time he worked as a clerk in a local store. By 1850, however, at age 22, J.O. decided to seek his fortune in the California gold rush. With $600 A.A. had borrowed for him, and accompanied by a fellow Peruvian, J.O. went by canal to Defiance, Ohio, then by the Ohio Canal to Cincinnati, where the young men boarded a steamer to New Orleans via the Ohio and Mississippi rivers. From there, they sailed to the Isthmus of Panama and by another boat down the Chagres River as far as Cruces, and then traveled by foot to the Pacific, with trunks carried by donkey. From the Pacific coast to Panama, another sailing vessel took 3 months to reach San Francisco. Except for visits home in August 1855 and February 1860, J.O. spent more than a decade in California strenuously attempting to make his fortune. His first job was helping to build a mining dam on the Feather River. When he saved up $600, he sent it home to repay his father. Deciding the work was too hard for the meager monies he earned, J.O. clerked in a store, then bought a building at Oak Valley, where he prospered almost from the start. He came to realize that, rather than panning for gold, he could make more money by setting up a general store, selling water, and constructing a flume and dam. "It has always been my aim to be what is called rich," wrote J.O. to his brother Alfonso in 1858, and so, in time, he was. Although, along with others who had made their way to El Dorado, he battled illness, fierce weather, and loneliness. As the 1850s passed, he seemed more and more to tire of California and to regret his bachelor existence. While J.O. was in California, Alfonso married Sarah Bars. "Married life is indeed the happiest way of living when a man is in his luck enough to find one who truly loves him," J.O. wrote to his brother. "But that is the catch. I do not know whether it is luck or good judgment. It is a mixture, in my opinion, of both." J.O.'s letters have a richness of sentiment and give an impression of him as a person with deep feelings, although he was always intent, as he said, on making a pile. In 1860, J.O. returned to Indiana and married Alfonso's cousin-in-law, Rachel Henton. The morning after their wedding, he and his bride began the journey back to California. Once there, they settled in Brandy City. 2 years later, Rachel Cole gave birth to a daughter, Katie, who was destined to become the woman Cole Porter worshipped and celebrated throughout his life. In 1865, Rachel gave birth again, this time to a son, Louis. J.O. finally sold his properties in Brandy City in 1867 and returned with his wife and 2 children to Peru. J.O. had amassed a considerable amount of money in California, which he cleverly invested not only in Indiana farmland, but in acres of West Virginia forests as well. When the timber was exhausted, the land was found to have rich deposits of coal and oil. J.O.'s wealth was estimated at $17 million, and in time he was judged to be the richest man in Miami County. At home in Indiana, J.O. farmed the fertile acres he owned, which were watered by the Wabash River. J.O.'s son Louis was educated in Peru schools and at Notre Dame University in Indiana. and assisted in the management of his father's immense lumber interests at Cincinnati. Eventually, he married a Cincinnati girl, and the couple had 4 children: Louis, Omar, Kate, and Samuel. Rumors reached Cole as a child that J.O. had sent his son to West Virginia to work in the family business, but he had gotten into some kind of trouble there, and his father had had to pay off the authorities. Louis was an alcoholic, but his untimely death in November 1903 was attributed to the ill effects of a hernia operation. Only a few months earlier, he had given a dinner dance just before the gay season which the young people have been enjoying shut down owing to the advent of Lent. Cole believed that his uncle must have found himself in further troubles, because when Louis died, J.O. said, "It's the best thing that could have happened." Ironically, in light of his son's troubles with alcohol, one of J.O.'s successes was the establishment of a brewery. As his family went regularly to church on Sunday, being in the brewery business was okay with the majority of his fellow townsmen, said a jocular friend of Cole who remembered J.O. Cole's maternal grandmother seems to have had a more poetic and metaphysical temperament than her husband, at least as evidenced by the preface she wrote in a kind of autograph album she kept. "These pages and the hands which made their record here will pass away, but the thoughts recorded shall remain. And as true as it is that the heart of man answereth to man, so true is it that the sympathies and affections of pure hearts are as immortal as the human soul." In the summer of 1890, Katie's mother died in Peru, and in the winter of 1892, her father married Bessie Labonte. On April 9th, 1884, years before her mother's death, Miss Kate Cole, then 22 years old, married Samuel Fenwick Porter, who was 26, at her parents' house. The wedding took many by surprise, so unannounced and so quietly executed was it. Sam Porter had migrated as a young man from Vevey, an Indiana town on the Ohio River. Little is known of his mother, Catherine McCallum, whose father had emigrated from Scotland. Sam's father and paternal grandfather were both farmers, his father having the distinction of serving in the Indiana House of Representatives, and his grandfather of serving as a captain in the War of 1812. Sam Porter gave the commencement oration at his graduation from Vevey High School in 1875. He moved to Peru, Indiana, and went on to become a parvenu druggist, or at least that was the impression Cole gave one of his Yale friends. Sam had found employment as a drug clerk and later purchased a drugstore. His business profited, and he expanded and later became the city's leading druggist, owning and operating 3 stores. A brother of Sam's served as best man at his wedding. Today in Peru, no trace remains of Porter's paternal family, nor of the Porter drugstores, one of which stood, until 1924, opposite the courthouse that dominates the town square. Sam's brother Andrew joined him in opening a combination drug and restaurant business, and they named the latter Café de la Paix, which suggests a flair not foreign to Cole. Another business structure in town with family associations was the Cole Building, erected in 1886 by Sam's father-in-law, J.O., and on the same block as the Cole Building was the popular shop of one of Peru's colorful characters, the confectioner Robert Pelkey. Long after his death, Peruvians remembered Pelkey, who boasted a snow-white beard that reached to the floor. In cold weather, old-timers recalled, he used his whiskers for a muffler and kept warm. When J.O. was in his 20s, he reported in letters home the large profits he was realizing from his dry goods business in California. Samuel Porter's profits were not in the same league. Nonetheless, As one critic observed, unconsciously J.O. probably preferred an obscure druggist dependent on his bounty to an equal, and in consequence a rival to his daughter's affection. Katie worshipped her father. At the same time, she valued her freedom. A plain girl, she returned from finishing school to Peru and decided to wed the handsome Porter, despite the opinion of most Peruvians that she was marrying down. Porter was said to have been rather dreamy in temperament, but he surprised the town by protesting the monopoly he felt his druggist competitors exercised. Katie, who was not particularly jolly, said she married Sam Porter because I just love the way he plays the guitar. The house Porter lived in as a child, still standing, is a largish frame one, Victorian in style. It is in a neighborhood of other Victorian houses, at the corner of 3rd and Huntington Streets, just a few blocks from the town center. When Cole was in elementary school, he gave shows on the sun porch at 102 East 3rd and charged a penny or a bottle cap admission. Peru is characterized by tall trees, luxuriously leafy in summer, which stand amid spacious lawns and colorful gardens. Oak, walnut, ash, and poplar trees, and in sunshiny nooks sumac, dogwood, and wild briar abound. Cows graze in fields, and in summer the landscape resembles a scene by Constable. The Porter's life in town must have been quite trim and contained. The First Baptist Church is located a few blocks from their home, for example, and Sam's drugstore was not much farther in another direction. 75 miles north of Indianapolis, Peru has changed very little since the 1890s, when Cole was a boy. Located on the banks of the celebrated Wabash River and near the juncture of the Wabash and the Mississinewa, it had a population of only 1,200 when Cole was growing up. As a boy, Cole sang in the choir of St. John's Lutheran Church, as did Emil Schramm, who grew up to be the head of the New York Stock Exchange. 2 pictures always hung in Schramm's Wall Street office, one of Abraham Lincoln and the other of J.O. Cole. Covering in Cole's boyhood 1,500 acres, Peru already had a handsome public library, to which Andrew Carnegie donated $25,000. The farming county surrounding Peru, an amount of it waving with corn and wheat by high summer, is said to be the best in Indiana. The Coles who survive today cheerfully admit to their lack of musical gifts. In reply to a question about this subject, his cousin James O. Cole emphasizes that neither in his generation, nor as far as memory takes him, can he recall any other Cole with a musical talent. It must be true, he said when informed that some people recall the gift Sam Porter had in music. Hazel Boland, a nonagenarian when interviewed, remembered Sam Porter vividly. She and her large family lived in her childhood years on the Porter farm, and she knew Cole well. Cole had one of the most wonderful fathers, she said without any prompting. He gave me my first music lesson. Cole got that musical genius from his father, not from his mother's rich family. His father was a good pianist. He had a lovely tenor voice. That's the truth. In Mrs. Boland's estimation, Sam Porter was a good man, but not burdened by religion. Passive was the word she applied to Sam. A gentleman of the old school, who was quite cultured, a very thoughtful person, who would take pains at Christmas time, for instance, to make certain that children each received some special gift they wanted. Mrs. Porter she thought spoiled and not very friendly. But Cole was close to his mother, and not very intimate with his father, who was a compassionate man. Everybody's sorrows became his sorrows. Mrs. Porter called him Sammy.
He'd telephone her every day around noon. "Katie, Katie," he'd say, "this is Sammy." He was a warmer person than she. The loss of his 2 children was very sad for him. Mr. Porter could have done with more affection from his wife and less money.
These repeated references to Sam Porter's love for children make all the more mysterious his failure to be closer to his surviving son. Cole was born on June 9th, 1891, and he was a healthy baby, which must have been a great relief to Katie and Sam after the deaths of their infant son, Louis Omar, and, just the year before Cole's birth, their baby daughter Rachel, who died of tubercular meningitis. Sam was a reader, and it may be that with his encouragement, Cole read such childhood classics as Alice in Wonderland, Treasure Island, and The Swiss Family Robinson. As is true for many children, reading was an escape for Cole, and at the same time an enchantment. But more than fiction, Sam Porter liked to read poetry. The English Romantics, but also the Victorians, among whom he favored Browning. Cole remained devoted to that poet. Although Cole recalled in later life the impatience of his father at Cole's failure to comprehend lines that they looked at, he somewhat grudgingly said, "I suppose he started me writing lyrics." One can only imagine that mother and son, perhaps unconsciously, conspired from Cole's earliest years to create an intimate union from which Sam Porter was excluded. When Cole was about 6 years old, a gypsy persuaded Katie that a person whose initials spelled out a simple word would be fortunate. Once convinced, she added Albert as her son's middle name, after his maternal great-grandfather, A. Cole, without any discussion of the matter with her husband. Regrettable was the assignment of Mr. Porter to the role of disciplinarian. On one of the rare occasions when his mother punished him, Cole said to her, "I thought that Sammy was the whipper." Cole's first recorded appearance in Peru was remembered by his friend Tommy Hendricks, named for his great-uncle Thomas Andrews Hendricks, who had been governor of Indiana and vice president of the United States under Grover Cleveland. It was in July 1894, on the day when the first horseless carriage reached Peru. As it progressed down Broadway, a crowd gathered, among whom could be seen Sam Porter standing in front of his drugstore with a 3-year-old Cole alongside him. Parades were not unknown to Peruvians. Quite the contrary. Peru had for many years been the headquarters for the Hagenbeck and Wallace Circus. As a circus center, Peru naturally was a wonderful town in which to be a boy. Elephants were known to enter drugstores and disrupt the soda fountain trade. Perhaps Porter's pharmacy had indeed been the site of such a bizarre occurrence. There is still the tale told in Peru of a malicious keeper who one day let an elephant to drink in the Wabash. The elephant knocked him down, thrust him into the river, placed his foot on the keeper's head, and held it there until the man drowned. Playing the steam calliope was the contribution Sam Porter made to the village parades, and is further evidence of his musical talents. Here Comes the Bandwagon, published November 1929, and sung by Gertrude Lawrence in a film called The Battle of Paris, demonstrates the impact the circus parades continued to have on Cole. If you look your childhood over, there was nothing half as grand as the old-fashioned circus parade, and the greatest thing about it was the Oompa Oompa band and the heartbreaking music it played. The lure and lore of the circus filled our thoughts, wrote Tommy Hendricks, who met Cole when both attended kindergarten. Tommy's father was the owner of the Blue Pharmacy, a Peru rival of Samuel Porter's drugstore. "Cole and I were buddies from the first day we met," he went on to say. The two boys lived nearby and met at the corner carrying lunch pails. Much of their talk was about the circus, and Cole disclosed that his own ambition was to become a circus performer. A clown suit was one of his favorite possessions. "I'll remember forever, when I was but 3, Mama, who was clever, remarking to me, 'Be a clown, be a clown. All the world loves a clown.'" Years later, Cole wrote this song for a film titled The Pirate, at Gene Kelly's request, and although it took him only overnight to compose, in some sense it had been gestating since those childhood days in Peru. The boys were obsessed with the circus. Hendrix reported that it filled their thoughts, and he reproduced in his writings bits of the kinds of conversations he and Cole had. How many elephants are they going to have? Have they started training the bareback riders yet? The wild man of Borneo was a familiar sight, as he spent the winter months shining shoes at the village barber shop. The fat lady was also a favorite of Cole's, and he liked very much to drive her about Peru and its environs in his donkey cart. Sometimes, in the spring, the wild man would tell Cole and Tommy that the circus was resuming its life, and that outdoor practice in the riding ring was to begin. On Saturday, the two boys would hightail it to the circus grounds early to secure the best places by the rail. Once, the Royal Repenskys were working on their riding routine, teaching one of the youngsters, not much older than either of us, to ride bareback. It took perfect timing. Time after time, hour after hour, they went through the intricacies of the maneuver until it looked so simple that almost anyone could do it. Writing decades later, Tommy Hendrix insisted that Cole learned the value of practice at first hand from the greatest aerial and equestrian artists of the day, performers who knew that lack of practice might mean a mistake, and a mistake might mean death. The perils of the bicycle were fewer, perhaps. As in many towns at the turn of the century, bicycles were the mechanical means most people used for transportation. Hendrix remembered Cole as a fast, fearless rider who would dash in and out between horse-drawn vehicles, making handsome circles around me and even ride without holding on to the handlebars. Once, when he encountered Tommy on his bicycle, Cole leapt onto the handlebars, but the two of them were unable to stop the speedy vehicle, and they crashed through the swinging doors of the town saloon and slid to a stop at the brass rail. One of the places to which the boys cycled was the home of the bedridden Aunt May, a relative of two childhood pals, who delighted Cole and the others with the stories she read them and the verses she composed. According to Tommy, Cole learned from Aunt May that persons who are alive can write things that may be printed in books. A wonderful thought, new and surprising. The day after one visit to Aunt May, Cole went home and wrote The Bobolink Waltz, 1902. This was not his first composition. How much Cole was motivated by the muse or his desire to please is difficult to say, but nothing distracted him from music for long. The first work he composed in 1901, The Song of the Birds, is dedicated to his mother. Its parts are labeled Mother's Cooing, The Young Ones Learning to Sing, One Bird Falls from the Nest, The Bird is Found, They Fly Away. Katie understandably approved. Soon, Cole and Tommy were joined by Desdemona Bars, daughter of a long and distinguished line of Peru gentry. The Barses and the Coles argued furiously over politics and enjoyed their disagreements hugely. Des and Cole Porter talked more about the circus, a favorite meeting place for them, than about politics. Not surprisingly, Desdemona's mother read Shakespeare, and she was also interested in opera. Sometimes she took her daughter to Indianapolis to see the productions of visiting companies. So a lively exposure to music was another bond between Des and Cole, who by the age of 6 was practicing the piano daily and learning to play the violin.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?